Welcome to the Erasing Shame podcast, a digital outreach of Christian Asian mental health. I'm your host, DJ Chuang, and today I'm joined with Kenny Jang, who's the founder of the Thrive and Cultivate Summit, an online mental health virtual summit for church leaders, coming on May 18th and 19th on 2023. And we are so happy to be co-sponsors with a number of other great ministries and companies that are seeking to serve and help churches and church leaders, pastors, ministry leaders in their overall well-being mentally and emotionally. Kenny, thanks for joining me on Erasing Shame.
Glad to be part of this. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today, DJ.
And Kenny, just a little retrospective, I have you to thank for inviting me and launching me into my whole podcast experience 11 years ago in 2012 when I started Social Media Church.
Was it that long ago? Wow.
Yes, and you just nudged me along and said, just get started. And
yes,
you were
bias for action.
Yes, and so here we are 11 years later. I've had a couple other podcasts under my belt. This one, Erasing Shame, started in 2018 as a place for healthy, honest conversation about our experiences as Asian Americans and shame-based culture. And then the past 6 months really focusing in on encouraging Christian Asian mental health. And we're thrilled to be a sponsor and participant in this Thrive and Cultivate Summit. So would you be able to recall what inspired you to start this summit to help church leaders in mental health?
Such a great question. So, 3 years ago, we were experiencing this thing. I don't know if you were experiencing this thing called the pandemic. And so this little thing called the pandemic threw, I think, everyone for a loop. And I think one of the things that it did was it brought mental health into the spotlight, where I believe before the pandemic versus after the pandemic, that there probably is, I don't know what the stats, if there are, much more awareness for mental health, and that it is, I think, been much more normalized to talk about your mental health today than it is 5 years ago. And so I think that's one blessing, as you might say, coming out of the pandemic. So back then, in terms of churches, though, mental health still had a very big stigma. And more than anything, lack of awareness and education. And it just started, this whole thing started out of a personal question, like, what is mental health? What if I'm working in a church with a volunteer role or staff, and someone presents themselves with a mental health issue, how do I respond in a way that's actually compassionate and not disrespectful? And there's a lot of stuff where it feels like it's a landmine in terms of talking about mental health, especially if someone's saying that they are suffering and exposed to some issues. And so it just started there. So I was looking around for resources. There weren't any that were really comprehensive at the 101 level, not the PhD level, not the practitioner level, not the level where everyone's, clued into this thing, but someone like me, a layperson who is clueless about mental health. Can you talk to me in plain English and just help me in the context of the church, not the context of the secular marketplace? And so that's how it started. And I think it's just one of those things where, is it Seth Godin who says that the sweet spot of the internet is to aggregate like-minded people? And I said, why not start a summit? So we've been doing that with on a lot of other topics, and it was fitting that we did it with mental health. So this is our third year. Over the last 2 years, we've had, I think, over 7,000 people register for this thing. And so hopefully it's been helpful. I know it's been helpful for me personally. So hopefully it's been helpful to a lot of other churches.
Well, I'm sure you've had tremendous feedback by hosting this for over 7,000 people that have registered and participated, and you make it free during the 2 days of the summit. Plus, you provide a all-access pass for on-demand viewing after those 2 days at a very affordable price, and you've put tons of value into that. But before we get to the logistics of all that, tell us about the design of this year's summit that is particularly unique, because we are 3 years after you've started the summit. We are kind of coming out of that COVID lockdown experience, and we're still kind of readjusting to, we haven't used that word new normal, but we are readjusting to a hybrid world, especially in church life. So tell us about the design. You've had 5 specialized tracks this year.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is just this recognition that almost half, I think it's like 44% of pastors are saying that their jobs are just like mind numbing and draining, and they are just on the verge of burnout and stuff. And so I think just from that first person point of view, as a church leader or pastor, how do we help that person? So we have a track that really hopefully is helping with self-care, and how do you stay resilient in this condition that isn't, like you said, we're not out of it, it's not done. And so that self-care aspect, focusing on the church leader themselves. And so that's one track. Trauma and grief is another one I think that's related, because I think there is a lot more incidences and experiences of trauma and grief that they experience first person, as well as those that they minister to. So those are 2 tracks in particular that started out of that. And then there's just like back to basics, just understanding just basic mental health issues. What is that? What are symptoms? What are tools? Just all the basic stuff. We actually are taking this almost like a FAQ approach for a whole series, or like a playlist of videos, where we have over, I think, like several dozen, I think it's like 4 dozen videos that are just addressing basic FAQs in addition to the whole track. And then there is supporting the church leader as they actually minister to their community, right? Their actual ministry work. How do you implement it? We got, talk like one of the leaders is sharing how he's using a specific curriculum in their groups and training. So showing use cases and imagining what it could be if your church was supposed to support and embrace mental health for your community. What does that look like? And I think Kay Warren is speaking this year, that you've helped facilitate that. She's speaking to that as well. And then the last track, the 5th track, is the BIPOC, Asian American mental health in particular. I just think there's an awareness that certain communities and segments have particular needs, and just putting out a little bit of a spotlight there. If you're watching, I'm Korean American, and so I'm part of that Asian American BIPOC community, and just thought, hey, it's just one of those things where I think it would be helpful for that community, but also for the broader community to see that happen. So it's not just compartmentalized in its own little sub-niche event that's only attended there, but you have exposure there. So I thought that was a win-win as well. So five tracks. We're evolving. We're trying to see what works, what doesn't, and hopefully these things will resonate this year with attendees.
Yeah, and thank you for making room for a special track that really features the voices that are BIPOC, non-white, Black, Indigenous, people of color, and Asian Americans. And I was able to reach out to a couple handfuls of connections that I had. So Curtis Chang is coming out with a new book in May, Anxiety as an Opportunity for Spiritual Growth. I've been taking his online course, and the book is coming out mid-May, and we'll feature him in a podcast right here on Erasing Shame as well. But I'm glad he's also part of the summit. Daniel Hyun, he's a repeat. I think he's been on all 3 of your summits. And then Gabriel Lowe, who's a licensed clinical psychologist, is on. Joe Padilla, I've gotten the privilege of meeting him at Saddleback Church, and he's put together an excellent curriculum that's used by thousands of churches and groups around 25 countries. A transformational discipleship experience for those who struggle with mental health. And so he's reimagining, redefining support groups. Ken Shigematsu, which He's a pastor up in Vancouver, Canada, and we'll be also talking with him here at Erasing Shame about his new book, which is related to shame and the gospel. Let's see. I'm scrolling through the names. There are so many names. Savan Penn.
I'm proud, DJ, that this year we do, if you look at the speaker roster on thrivingcultivate.com, that we actually have representation for people of color across the stage, right? And that,
yeah,
I mean, sad to say, in many, many church conferences that you and I go to, we don't see that type of representation. And we were just talking about this before we went on to record that they're not all speaking in the Asian American and the BIPOC track, right? And so I think they have a lot to offer on general topics as well. And so I love that we have both specialized topics and then broad-based voices that they're chiming in with their voice to the broad-based church as well.
Yeah, I just want to mention a couple more names because a lot of our audience is listening rather than watching.
Yeah.
Just Joe Kim from Mustard Seed Generation. Her little church of under 100 has a mental health ministry. You got to listen to her little talk. Very compelling that mental health and care in community is something the church can uniquely provide that complements professional therapy and medication. I'm going to give a little talk about how churches can make mental health care a part of their ministry that really helps people to grow, to thrive, and cultivate that kind of environment where it's no longer shameful or a stigma to struggle. I think in the information age that we live in, our brain is just overtaxed. Cognitive fatigue is a reality, and we have so much to learn in terms of staying healthy for the long run. And then certainly many other speakers. I actually have the website for the conference on the screen. You got this little pop-up on the lower left corner as people register. And it's flashing every 10 seconds or more often. So it's amazing.
I don't know if it's that often, but yeah, I mean, people are getting excited.
Hey, I'm watching this. It just flashed again. So it's amazing how many people are signing up. I'm thrilled for the response that you've got. And I'm really looking forward to how people respond to this. So tell us about the All Access Pass that you've put together. You've put together a lot of things. The ability to watch the videos from all the previous summits, as well as some other bonuses.
Yeah, I mean, before we get there, I think I want to reinforce this is a free summit. If you are associated with the church, whether you're pastor, staff, or key volunteers, it's made completely free for the 2 days that you can watch any and every one of those talks. There's no restrictions, that you'll be able to watch all of them. And DJ, during those two talks, it's a little bit different than other conferences. We're not live streaming throughout in a specific order. Every single morning at 8 a.m. Eastern, we are going to release the tracks for the day, and then you can watch them on demand on your own time for 24 hours. So day one, we're going to release a bunch of videos, and you're going to watch them in any order that you want, curate your own experience, get to the talks that you want. You don't have to sit through things. You don't even have to wait for things. You can literally just get to the talks that you want, get in and out. And if you have meetings, you could go to your meetings and come back later. A lot of people I know volunteer for churches, and so in the evenings is when they do it, or early morning. So it will be available for 24 hours, and then day two we'll release the last remaining tracks, and then you'll have 24 hours until actually the 19th to watch the rest of those. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands. One, it's completely free. No credit card required. It's completely free. And second is that it's totally flexible. You can watch one or all of them. You can rewatch things. So we've tried to make it as user centric as possible, because there's people come from all different time zones and actually many different countries. And so the on-demand model, it's everyone loves Netflix, right? And so you can either binge watch or just watch one and leave. And so that's the invitation. That's the first of all, and that's largely because we've found partners like yourself to help subsidize with great sponsors to subsidize the production of this, so that we can keep the gates open. If you choose to, no requirement, you can actually go for an all access pass. right now there's an early bird special. It's a pretty good discount right now, but the prices are going up. But there, yeah, you will have on-demand access to this entire library of talks. We have over 45 speakers this year, and I think we have over 70 videos total that you're going to be able to see for 6 months. So now until 6 months later, you can go back and watch them at your leisure. Many pastors and leaders are using it. They'll go back, choose one or two, watch it together with their team in a team meeting, and then they'll take the discussion guide. There's a conference notebook that comes in the All Access Pass that has discussion questions that are intended for team discussions for every talk. So a lot of times they'll use it for staff meetings. And I think this is a great way to promote mental health in your organization, that if every week you just take one video that's 10 to 12, 15 minutes and just show it, and then encourage the conversations among staff. I think that's a great way to support mental health in your organization. So there's things like that. There's a private podcast available of all the talks and some other supplemental information. There's MP3 audio versions if you want to download and use it on yourself. There's a digital magazine that I think we're up to issue number 6. So there's a whole collection of digital magazines that you can actually read. And then, like you said, you have access to the video vault. So the last 2 years worth of talks, again, over 30, 35 talks every single year, you have access to those as well on demand. And then this year, our friends over at Pray.com are offering a 1-year paid premium membership to their app. Usually it's $49. Last year I paid $49 cash, and this year I don't have to. So you have access to all of their content, sleep and meditation stuff, sermons, all the stuff that's amazing on that Pray.com app. So there's a couple other little things in there, but hopefully you'll see that it's a good value for many churches. If not, we're welcoming you to consume all the content for free, share it with your team leaders, start discussions. That's what we want. We want you to start discussions with your peers about all these things.
Well, thank you and your team for producing an incredible event, very valuable, and the church desperately needs it. I know I see this summit as well as this podcast and what we're doing at Christian Asian Mental Health as a catalyst to help churches really step into meeting the greatest felt need of our time and in our generation. And it's actually very accessible. It doesn't require theological training or medical training. It's really learning how we can be present for each other, carry one another's burdens, learning to listen and not just talking so much, which for whatever reason, the faith that we have been given and inherited from our forefathers has been very verbal. And we're realizing there's this whole emotional side to our well-being that we really need to cultivate so that we can thrive. So, Kenny, thank you again. It's great connecting with you online as well as in person once in a while. I can't wait till we hang out again and have some Korean barbecue.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for your ministry with Erasing Shame. It's just been amazing to see it flourish, and blessings on the future for where you're going.
Thank you, Kenny. And for those of you listening, we are now running on Spotify, so you can add a comment right there on the Spotify app or the Spotify website. We'd love to hear from you in the show notes for you to sign up for the Thrive and Cultivate conference. Well, the website is thriveandcultivate.com, or if it's easier if you remember, erasingshame.com. We'd love to hear from you. Click through. Let's talk about the conference when you join in and watch the free videos during the summit. And I hope you're inspired to take care of your health and your churches and your communities. Stay tuned to the Erasing Shame podcast all the month of May, because we'll be talking about Asian American and mental health and church, and featuring some of the new books that are all coming out. So you don't want to miss that. Thank you for tuning in. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Erasing Shame podcast. Check out the show notes at erasingshame.com and subscribe to our email for updates. We would love to hear from you, so please add your comments at our website or on social. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any podcast app, and you can also subscribe on YouTube or follow on Facebook. Please add a rating and review so we can reach more people with our message of health, hope, and compassion. This podcast is the digital outreach of Christian Asian Mental Health.